How do you live the good life when things are pretty bad? For my journal this morning, I thought I would play with this a little bit, even though that's not the question I started with. Let me just read a little bit what I started with, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what the video is about. Although ultimately it's going to be a video about asking the question or questions, and I see that there's two particular really important ones in my experience working with myself and working with other clients and so on over many years, and students as well. Two questions that are kind of very existential that often aren't answered very well and lead us to not only live in a bad situation, which are real, but to then have to live a bad life in the bad situation. Not so good. Pretty much that would be a slow process of suicide, homicide, life-acide, biocide, a spiral down, whether that's an obvious, result of using suicide as a way to get out of that trap of living a bad life in a bad situation. So I'm going to be looking at the alternative, and it's not, this is the positive, better alternative you should take. I don't teach that way. I don't do therapy that way. I do not philosophize that way. And I philosophize in what I call a fearlessness perspective. So just let me start with the journal. We're going to slowly walk into this. Thanks for hanging in with me. If you choose to do that today, I appreciate it. September 24th. So there's a whole new possibility. Each and every moment, each and every day. You must have to listen well. And I suspect I listen some days and moments better than others. And there's a lot going on, of course, and then me, inside and out, whether or not I am even picking up on the nuances, the subtleties, right, of what's to be listened to. I'm probably missing lots, and even when I think I'm listening. Okay, and when you don't feel you are listening so well, go back to any text. So you can see I'm kind of giving myself a prescription here in this spontaneous journaling, and I'm thinking this might be useful for some of my listeners, viewers. Okay, so when you don't feel you're listening so well, go back. That's that step back. And ask yourself, okay, what have I got to listen to? Is anything worth listening to? Well, just simply for me, sit around you, look around, and because I'm surrounded by books and papers and articles and a huge library, just pull one thing off the shelf and examine it. In other words, listen to it. Observe it openly. What's called tier 2 thought. Tier 2 observation. So that's on my last video. I'm reflecting here. If you go back and look at the video before this one on my YouTube channel, I'll talk about tier 1 observation or seeing, and tier 2 seeing, and that was based on Jiddu Krishnamurti's ideas and then some of my own. So back to my prescription here, just observe it openly, right? So reach over, arbitrarily grab a book. Happens to be the one that I grabbed today. Not that that's even important. I am surrounded by these. I've chosen to surround myself by certain things, so listen to them. So here I open up. Spontaneously. Defense. How would governments defend themselves in a New Age society? They would take very little from our present monolithic mode of defense. First and foremost, we would refuse to inflame others. We would eschew military threats, military bases abroad, and economic, let alone military control over others. We would also seek to cooperate economically, politically, culturally, and every other way with governments and peoples around the globe. We would go further. We would share our wealth with others. What I have to be careful of is not to fall into a tier one way of observing. When I just say, just listen to something, I'm obviously feeling not so great, off-centered, depressed, disappointed, whatever it may be, in feeling bad in a bad world, kind of feeling set. And then if I go to that, I'm going to bring that set of not feeling good, and I'm going to impose it, and then I'm going to go into judgments, and I'm going to go into something I need to get out of that text because I'm trying to look for an answer. Well, people do that with not just a book. They do it with an astrology reading. They do it with the tarot cards. They do it with seeking someone for advice. Phone somebody up, even if it's a friend, even if it's your partner, even if it's a therapist, or because you're looking for something, right? You're wanting to already grab something. So when I said, just listen well. So to just go into that and, in a sense, befriend it as a text, as a listening to another person, that I've obviously chosen that book for a reason, because I know the author in some way, or I know their work in my history, and I find that is a kind of relationship. It's a beginning to listen to a relationship with this other, right? Without judgment, without needing to get something from it. I just invited it back in because it's already sitting there. It's already in my field of care. And so it, in that sense, deserves the listening. The most deadly mistake, as I continue my journaling here spontaneously, around the mental health wobbling, and I go through this, and certainly in COVID-19 pandemic, and just getting older and just watching where the world's going, I get into this wobbly kind of mental states, if you will, emotional. Wobbly also could mean up and down, roller coaster feeling at times, even though I'm certainly not in huge extremes around that, but I can feel the extremes. I can feel those extreme possibilities of my own set of mental health. And I come and was raised from a background of people, and I've married into relationships of mental health problems that were severe and caused a lot of trauma for me too. So I also get triggered by my own mental processes, and that might be happening to some of you too, because of background histories as well as where the world is going, and trying to live a quality life in a not so quality world. So let me just finish a little bit more, and then I'll go on to some of my key questions that I was saying that I think are existentially essential to play with, to work with. So this mental health wobbling is often to do with the self-obsessing, is a loss of a sense of control, a lack of meaningful agency, feel like, I just won't be able to change things anymore. And not just with the world, but with the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious. So that's where I kind of take off from a different view than cognitive behaviorist type psychologists and the positive psychologist types and so on with their prescriptions. And you can see I'm not here interested in getting to positive. I'm not asking for anything from you, from myself, in what I'm just sharing here about how to listen well. It's not got anything to do with positive and negative. I mean, that's really important. What it's got to do with is my conscious and my unconscious just doing practices like reaching for a book, listening well, coming back, might be doing some journaling on that without trying to get positive, without trying to break something, trying to conquer something. So then I say basically this conscious unconscious connection, and that's where my focus is. I'm saying there's a team here, just like there's a team between me and that author in that book and that text. I'm sort of trying to get back to the cooperative team. Now you could say, well, you're trying to get positive. Well, even not even positive, I'm just trying to get the team going again, because I can feel it's not functioning so well. So yeah, there's an instinctual correction when we are not regulating well as an organism. This is right in our every intelligence of ourselves to want to correct and self-regulate again. That's called homeostasis. This is biology, this is genetics, goes back to our ancient 4 billion history as living beings on a planet that struggles, if you're a life form, to keep existing. That's existential reality. It has not got to do with positive and negative judgments. It just is, right? It's kind of amoral, pre-moral, whatever you want to call it. So that's why I attempt a fearlessness psychology that does not start on a moral basis of feeling bad, negative, trying to get to positive. Because my argument will be, it will be a fear-based, need-driven motivation of trying to get good, positive, be well and healthy and so on. And the concern there is if you try on that trajectory, and you can be quite successful. The mind's very powerful. People can develop all kinds of strategies and tools, and psychologists will even give us these damn tools because they sort of work just like a pill. But they have side effects. Everything has side effects. And if it's fear-based from the start of that direction of trying to get well, trying to be normal, trying to be healthy, I want to feel, yeah, I can see why you want to regulate. Well, that desire to regulate, that movement is not a problem. That's the movement of fearlessness. From this fear-based structure of what you might feel like some kind of sickness, or, as I said, a mental health wobbling or something like that, where fear, ultimately terror, ultimately sense of decay and death is upon us. I'm going to move on, skip some parts of my journaling. So once I can avoid myself getting caught in the sea of waves of trying to get positive from negative, just listen well. Maybe it's from that text. Maybe I go back to it. Maybe I don't even look at that text that I just reached for, that team, that friend. But I'm aligning in that process. I'm aligning or creating a passageway to the unconscious, which is much bigger intelligence than me. It's the 4 billion years of intelligence of life, knowing how to self-regulate. Oh, psychologists aren't trained to tap into all that. Professional psychologists in the modern world, they may know little bits about how to tap into self-regulation processes, and therapists and so on. They do. Spiritual teachers, they do know some of those processes, but I'm just saying the unconscious is way bigger than any of those teachers, advisors. So see here, there is no advisor to seek. You get that? That's really important when you are utilizing this approach. If you're understanding, if I'm half clear today, which I may not be, I'm just wading through that there's no advisor here. But there was an action toward that possibility of a team, right? Of a connection to a text, an author, which I picked up in that book, which is on New Age politics. And regardless of what I think about that or want to define New Age, or like it or not, and all those criticisms, the point was the action of connection. Why? Because I'm doing a practice of some kind of self-regulation and something what I call on the path of fearlessness. Not, and watching carefully, I don't come from that fear-based position. And I'm not trying to make that fear-based position negative. It's not. This is beyond positive and negative. It's beyond good and bad. And I know that's not easy to get in the words, and those concepts of good, bad, right, wrong are so filtered through lenses of meaning and understanding and cultural conditioning. That's the point of, I can use the language, I can try to describe it, but you have to sort of experience it. And it's not that complex. You will get bits of it as you practice this. Some of what I'm teaching today, some of what I was teaching in second tier and first tier seeing in the last video as well. So let me come back to listening. And I'll just read aloud last part and get to these two questions that I really am wanting to more dwell with in the rest of the video. So I take a conscious detour, in a sense, from positive and negative, and even trying to take fear that I'm feeling, terror, fear, the way the whole world is going, the way my life's going, the future. And it's like, wow, sometimes I just say, do not think about the future, Michael, very far. Don't even think about the future sometimes. And that's kind of weird. I say that because I actually am a futurist thinker. I read futurist works and theories and philosophies, and I want to apply them to the world and education and so on, learning, therapy, healing. But I actually really, my own experiences, don't think about the future too much, because that gets me to a really mental health wobbling. And even to the point of, quote, suicidal, death-driven energies and forces that I just feel like, okay, I'm out of here. It's just as well. The whole thing is going down in a hell cycle anyway. But when I take this conscious detour, this reaching out, this moving off of just stepping away from the need or fear base to get anything, just practice that from another, I find a route that takes me to an awareness of my disappointment. Disappointment seems like a simple, you could call it a feeling, or I don't like to call it an emotion. I don't even think it's an emotion so much. I think it is a feeling. And that's really the concept for today that probably is what I'll title this video. It is disappointment and letting myself be disappointed. I believe that will lead me to the best truth. So this is the thesis I have, and it comes from a lot of, again, my own therapeutic, healing, transformative experiences for decades and decades. That accepting of disappointment about the world, about myself, about just the way things are going today, now, or when I think about the future. Let it be monitored. Let that disappointment be a feeling that is actually like a referencing system. It's almost like a GPS system inside you. And it's sort of measuring. This is my theory behind it, and I think there's good justification. I'm not going to try to give that justification in this short little video. There's a good justification that disappointment is a little kind of needle or awareness inside us of, oh, if you go that way, that's a loss of quality, and that's disappointing. So again, disappointing is the way I can use a word, I can use a sense of felt experience to indicate a loss of quality in my environment. And that means my internal environment, external, objective, internal, subjective, loss of quality. And when I go this way, not so disappointed. And quality is arising in a way that's conducive to homeostasis, to what might even be euphoric in its extremist forms. A high. Yeah, we're capable of that. You don't have to make that positive. You don't have to make that negative. It's about high quality environments, low quality environment. And the organism instinctively, evolutionarily, has to have that even at the cellular, pre-cellular level. I would suggest atoms have that capability. That's a quality environment for me to exist. That's not a quality environment for me to exist. It's on the way of decline. Life. And then I come to the place, well, my life and life itself are already tipping from the moment of birth, slowly in this direction of lower quality. Because there's going to be a decay process. You know, again, we can sort of flip a little to this side and have some high quality experience environments. And then, but generally my being as a ego, psychology, mental health functioning being, an existential being, a spiritual being with an existential part as well, a body. So I'm not going to talk about people who like to see that we're a spiritual being, you know, coming in a body. That's a whole other philosophy that is questionable, interesting, but questionable. So in this body condition, this self condition that I know of, I am in a process, right, from birth to death, declining. Quality of life is going to go down. Now bring in from pre-modern traditional societies now to modern societies to postmodern societies, and where we're going now in a world that is, you know, really in deep crisis because of the ways that humans have contributed to a massive amount of pollution, overuse. You could say overpopulation, but it's really overuse, and uses that are damaging and not been well built with recycling, reusing, and care. No, not that much care. It's more a take. So that's got so intense. Now we're all feeling, at least whether you feel it or not, this little needle inside us. If you're really honest with yourself and you do this reflection, maybe like I suggested as one way to reflect, one way to pause, right, to listen well. I'm basically disappointed in myself, and myself is the world in that sense, where one organism is a pretty rational, scientific, and just intelligent understanding of how life is so connected to everywhere else, more or less, subtle or not so subtle. So I'm becoming a translator in this. What I'm just guiding you to is when you move into this place of disappointment and acceptance of it, no positive, negative, again, I become accepting of, I've got this indicator that just is telling me quality is going down. And I can guarantee you, I'm like noticing it all over the place. I notice it moment to moment. I notice it in, you know, built-in obsolescence and quote objects and things that we need, so-called, and we use and buy or whatever. The quality of the air and air pollution, the noise pollution, this is reducing my quality of life. So when we come to the process of death and having to decide whether to live or not, and includes suicide choicing. In that, it's really about quality of life isn't worth living anymore. You'll hear that, right? This is very common sense. I don't have the quality of life to continue to desire to live. And I don't see it improving. The disappointment is so intense. The needle has fallen so far in my perceptual, and probably very accurate for the most part. Yeah, you can get skews in that perception, but generally I'm saying trust it when you feel the disappointment. Because it's not just about your feelings. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not just about you. It's actually about being an organism on this planet in this ecological dynamic of complex connections that is detecting a quality degrade, drop. And you're meant to detect it. Now, whether the society wants to hear about that, usually not. But if you actually listen to most people and how they live, you can hear all the disappointments. So when just a little bit of a story aside, when I was a therapist working in a group home for a residential pull-out program 24/7 for a 12-month period of boys 13 to 18 who basically just could not function well in the society, in their family systems, schools and so on, they would come to our ranch program, and our job was to rehabilitate them, right? Of course, great training ground for me. It was a great learning ground. I was not, quote, trained as a typical psychological therapist in the training schools. I came from other backgrounds of lots of healing work and educational work, and I was just so prepped and ready to learn and be part of understanding what's going on in with those boys and their systems that they're involved in, the world that they're involved in. And of course, it brought out all my youth and my intelligences that I learned as a young person, and also my great disappointments as a young person. And that's not because I was horribly abused and had a horrible family and all that. It's just I was really disappointed in the world. And it was not just it was this feeling. And it's not just my feeling, I'm repeating, it's the feeling of disappointment. So working with those adolescents, I phenomenologically emerged in my experience with them, in very intense settings many times for ongoing long periods. I worked there 10 years. I came to a couple of different questions and variations on. So these are what I'm going to offer you, and just kind of leave this video with these questions there as inquiry ongoing as we go into this COVID-19 pandemic, world cascading crises, fear and terror levels, anxiety, mental health problems that are all going to go with the interior of what's going on in the exteriors. Yeah, they go together. I'll admit it. I can't just extract myself and try to be positive while the world's a mess. Well, I can try that, and I can use all kinds of pivot points of pills and excitement and trying to be positive and try to make lots of money or whatever to try to not experience that whole conscious, unconscious relationships. These huge, my relationship with the world, with the unconscious, and everybody else's feelings. I'm connected to those too. They come around, they're in the field. Whether I care about that field or not care about the field, they're in the field, and you're going to be feeling it at some level. Okay, to the questions for pondering. As I let myself be disappointed and register it, let it do its thing, because it's telling me something. It's telling the world something. I'm translating the world in terms of quality however I define that, and that's a complex topic. Won't go into it. The question, why do I die, arises. Why am I hurt, arises. So those are two questions that I presented to the young teenage boys I was working with. At some point, I would strategically do it. And I would be with them to help answer those questions. Why do I die? Why do I hurt? Okay, even though those are framed in the I, because as a young person, and as a society that's so individual, I-oriented, self, me, my, oriented in its conditioning of our being, which is much bigger than that, but that is our conditioning sort of operational center. I would focus in on the I, so that's why you hear the I in those questions. And of course, the larger question, once you kind of get them and get yourself working on those questions, why do I die? Why do I hurt? Is because the quality of life is going down. Get it? That's the connection. And then that gets us understanding the disappointment of life, which feels like a huge disappointment when it's going down to decay, to die. Your fate, the fate of everyone, every living being. So that's really good work, listening well, working those complications of all of that and nuance is way beyond what I can cover, what you might experience, so you can share what you might experience or have experienced on this video. And then the question will move, I think, quite nicely from not why do I die, why does anyone die? And my argument is our school systems, our family systems, our parents did not have a pedagogy, an existential pedagogy, an existential curriculum in our educational systems. And oh, do we need it today? Yeah. We're doing education in a world of pandemic that could go on forever. It's changed the world and probably continually will. Things are not the same. So existentially, we have to be not the same. We can't think in the same ways. We cannot operate healthily at all. And I mean, I think you can operate well in a not well world. Yes, you can. It'll still be limited wellness, but it can be well in a non-well world. That's the point of the video. So my stomach's growling. If you hear it, time for breakfast, time to move on. And the whole question of hurt and hurting and healing that comes with hurt will also be, a one that I will continue to do videos on. I think it's one of the greatest loss of quality of education revolves around how we have not taught ourselves well, listened well to how we're hurt, and when hurt, then heal. And we're losing the quality of healing that's required for our times. Yeah, there's some healing going on. There's some trauma work going on, right? And how to work through traumas. Yeah, there's some good things that we're arising to, but little too late. It doesn't mean it's done and horrible and forever. Why try harder from here forward, just because that is a reality? It's too little too late. Well, the too little too late is there's consequences, and the consequences is what we're seeing in the mental health crises and conflict that's unresolvable, intractable seemingly, and so on. And that could definitely threaten, all life on this planet within a very short time, including all the excesses of our pollution that has now, changed the climate dynamics to such a point as it's going to be continually threatening the existence of life on this planet. So those are all existential kind of truths that I speak. Not that they are the absolute truth. And it's not the only position on the truth. Hope you get that sense that I'm open to other perspectives as well, but this kind of existential, holistic approach, integral approach, I think it will be very useful for us to carry forward, but a lot of work needs to be done in it, right? And so this notion and those questions hopefully will be a useful guide for you today and into the next days. Talk soon. Dr. R. Michael Fisher, virologist, educator, and human being in the process of my own wobbles, of my own mental health challenges.